Well, howdy, friends. Brian Flechsig, a matter of outfitters in the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and we're here with our great friend and business associate, Mr. Kelly Galloup. Y'all know Kelly.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's my line.
I know. Kelly, I want you to talk and tell our viewers a little bit about your philosophy on colors when it comes to streamers. I made the comment, people ask questions all the time, as you know, whether they're in the shop, on the phone, or via email. What fly should I buy? What two flies would you buy? Mm-hmm. And just kind of jokingly, if I only had to buy two flies, I wouldn't fly fish.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
Yeah. And I often tell the story about fishing with you, and I'll be fishing a Swimmin' Jimmy or a Zoo Cougar, my favorites, my go-tos that I'll stick to ad nauseum. And in that same 16 minutes that we just fished a run together, you've gone through 8 different flies.
Pretty quick. Yep.
Yeah. Can you explain that philosophy a little bit and tell us kind of your rotation?
Well, my philosophy on that is that the first trigger point is your color, and if you color will be changed. It seldom will hold for more than 2 hours. You're lucky if you get a longer bite than that. And for me, I'm going to go through my rotation, which generally starts, and it doesn't really matter how you start it. And my basic one is just that I go from opaque colors first, so it'd be either white or black. And then I go to tan or olive, which are neutral colors, and they're opposite ends of the spectrum. Then I go to yellow or chartreuse. And so I go through those very quickly. And if it's a river I know, like tomorrow we're going to fish here, and I don't know this river. Mm-hmm. So I might hold it a little bit longer, but not very much. And if I know like on the Madison, I know I get 4,000 fish per mile, blah, 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 whatever you got. And that, there's 90% of the fish live in 5% of the water. So when you have, they're where you think they are. You know where the fish are, generally speaking. And so I will go maximum of 5 minutes with a fly. That would be on a river I don't know. But normally it's on the Madison, I might make 10 casts. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go from, like I said, white to black. And by that, again, it's just a rotate. It doesn't matter what it is. Just what you'll find, anglers will always revert to what they did best with. Like if they were there 2 days ago and they killed it on olive, they will go with olive until the damn paint falls off the boat. They'll start putting Band-Aids on their ego going, oh, it must be this barometric pressure. So that's such a crap. It's not that. You are not changing. You haven't done anything. One of our best friends and my favorite customers in the history of the world, Chuck and Nancy Shealy, both passed, and which is wonderful lives, great people. Chuck and Nancy, when I fished them for decades. They always had record days, and Chuck had my best day ever as a single angler on a streamer bite. And we fished one day. He had 5 fish over 23. He had 2 high 20s fish. And he got 5 giants, right? And I'd never had anybody do that before. I'm not sure up there I'd ever done that. And so the next day is identical barometric pressure, identical color to the sky, which was none. It was kind of a rainy 80-degree day. I mean, just absolutely nothing has changed. And I can't buy a fish. And how I came up with the rotation was just that day. And I'm just like, holy, you can't buy one in here, right? And I got a fly in my mouth. I got this fly. Let me change that fly check. And so I do it, and I throw the fly on the deck, and I take this one out of my mouth, and it's raining. It's kind of wet anyway. And I look down on the deck, and there's this pile of, I think, 3 or 4 flies. And it's a gob of green crap that was just, and I got another pile of green crap in my mouth. Everything, I have not changed a thing. I've changed the style of fly, but I'm going olive, 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 olive. And I was like, because yesterday was so good. And that's where I came up with that drying block on my boats and my carrying one with me, the drying thing.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, damn, I haven't really done anything here. I've wasted an hour of Chuck's day. And I just went, I don't know, I'll go to yellow. And Chuck cracks a 2-footer. I mean, just like that. And the light clicked on for me, that it was something happened. And so at that point on, I decided that I would glue a piece of foam to the side of the boat, and I started plug and fly every time I'd change when I'd look at it, because I'd actually see if I did something. And it was such a radical jump, because I went from a woolly scope and olive. I had all three. I had a twin tail Madonna on there. I had a butt monkey. I had all kinds. Everything was olive, yellow, boom. And so from that point on, I started making big contrasts. And that's where I decided white, black, tan, olive, yellow. That's my rotation. It doesn't matter. If you start, all I want people to do is do a big move, right? Mm-hmm. Don't go from shades of olive. Don't go, just make a move and don't hold the fly long. If you go through water that you fish 10 minutes and you don't think you've passed a fish, you might want to look for another river, you know? You got to have enough fish to make it worthwhile. Yeah. And so I go in fast jumps, and what I'm looking for, and again, it's color first, but what I'm looking for is a response from the fish. Mm-hmm. I'm not looking for them to eat it. I want that to happen, but that's an obvious thing. What I'm looking for is any type of movement that get a drive-by, a flat, anything like that, right? And so what I do with my rotation is I go through that, looking for that color. And quite frankly, I don't hold to my own rule. I almost always start my days in the morning with white. And because I dig a white bite, it gives me I'll start tomorrow morning. I don't care what the water, I'll start with white. It's partly for me to get my rhythm. Do I really, right. I'm not always on my A game or whatever. And so I'll start out and maybe realize, my elbow hurts or something hurts. I don't know. I don't want to go real fast. And so I'm thinking, well, I better look into these other flies. And that just gets me going, right? And so then I just go into black and I start the rotation and I go through it. I'm looking for a movement from the fish. The movement of the fish tells me I've got the color, even if they don't eat it, right? And so if they're coming up and they slash at it, then I'm going to think one of two things. It's either my retrieve's too fast, too slow, one or the other, or it's the shape of the fly. So I go for the color first, and then if I think that it's my retrieve, I'll change the cadence of my retrieve. Maybe I'll start jigging a little bit more, or maybe I'll start going faster. If that doesn't work, then I'll change the fly style. So maybe I go from, say, a Zookoogery style fly to like a Peanut Envy, something very cylindrical, very eel-ish looking, a little snake thing going through the water. And so lamprey or whatever. And then that doesn't work, I go right into the rotation. I just do not hold long. Like you said, it's 2 minutes is for me. I tell people that, they don't like to jump quite as fast as I do. No. But 3 to 5 minutes is a long time. And that's a long time with a fly. And so I go for the basic jumps, and I go radical jumps every time.
Well, and when I tell people that, it basically comes across as a sales pitch, like I'm trying to sell them every color of fly. And I'm not necessarily, I'm giving them advice that I've learned from you over the years. A couple of things to add to that. I don't know, it was 8 or 10, it might have been 15 years ago, that when I kind of learned this from you and did start to incorporate it, I started studying Theodore Gordon a lot, who was around the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s, was known as the father of modern day dry fly fishing. And Theodore Gordon had a similar philosophy with dry flies.
Sure. Yeah.
Which was different than what you have taught, for example, in Cripples and Spinners book, and you and I have had this discussion, or for example, Doug Swisher taught size, shape, color last. Theodore Gordon would change colors of his dry flies and wasn't overly concerned, although he mostly just fished upright wing mayfly imitations. So the shape was not overly concerned, but I found that very striking, and I remember calling you. And I said, hey, man, did you ever study Theodore Gordon? Because he had a similar philosophy. And you said, no, I don't read books.
That's your job. That's your job.
I learned this on my own, yeah. Check it out at MadRiverOutfitters.com. The new Mad River Outfitters Campfire mugs make coffee taste better.
You know what strikes me about that mostly is the fact that someone, even back then, was thinking enough to try something.
Yeah.
And so he's trying something, right? That just, I mean, you can go through a lot of stuff. You can go, Haig Brown, you can go through a lot of people who were doing things that were so, people thought was BS, and they did it, and they changed something because then people started figuring it out. And that was kind of what I was saying. We tend not to change something. It's, the definition of insanity. We don't change. We just start putting Band-Aids on our ego saying it's not us. It's the wind. It's the direction of the wind. It's the sky. It's all this crap that, what did you do to change the outcome? If you were a competitive fisherman in any other aspect, you would not sit stagnant. If there was a $100,000 paycheck at the end of that, you would not sit making excuses for one color or one style of fly.
Right.
And you would move through it.
Yeah.
Or if you're trying to impress some young man or woman and you want them to catch a fish, it's like, we're out fishing with your girlfriend. You gotta catch a fish. Do something. Change the damn fly, right? And for me as a guide of most of my life, the most important thing to me is that person catching the fish. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny you say that, and I don't know, maybe Charlie Weaver learned this from you. In fact, I think this was probably the year that you and I met, because my first trip to Michigan, I was hosting a salmon trip, and our guides were Kelly Galloup, Charlie Weaver, and Walt Grau were the guides on that trip. And that's when you and I first met. I first met Charlie and obviously met Walt, and went on to be very close friends with Charlie and played music with Charlie for years and years. But one of the greatest things, Charlie taught me two things that always stuck in my head, and I teach these in every school and every class that I ever teach. Charlie said, if you're not catching fish, change something.
Doesn't matter what it is.
Doesn't matter. You can change. I tell people, change your underwear. I don't care.
It means you're trying, and it's, what was the other thing?
Charlie also said, never leave fish to find fish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially steelhead anglers.
Well, we were on the PM.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
I remember.
Never leave fish to find fish. Yeah. Well, one final thing I think to point out about this, when you're talking about dry flies, and you're talking about selective feeding, we were talking about Cripples and Spinners, your second book, and in that book, you were referring to dry fly angling and selective. There's a big difference between selective feeding and opportunistic feeding. Dry fly fishing can be selective feeding. So therefore, shape, size, color. I think we do agree with that. But when you come over here, it becomes color first to you. So in selective feeding with dry flies, it's a different criteria than, you still have to change something. But over here, you're changing the color first. You got to get the color.
Let me just throw another apple in this cart.
Sure.
You're talking reactionary bite versus food bites. And I have a whole 2 books about this, right?
Yes, you do.
And so on a reactionary, and that's generally what we're doing when we're out there and we're moving our flies, and we're this kind of modern way of fishing, or new way of fishing where we don't swing them passively. And because when a passive fly is sent, and you could put a dry fly in there, you could put whatever you want in there, or a streamer, a passive is generally going to be an earth tone, all right? And so, but you don't necessarily go to fish a style. You go to fish for a fish, right? So if I'm looking for a reactionary bite, and that's why I said earlier, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this color thing. And if the fish, and so let's say they're swiping at it, because you're going to start out and you're looking for reaction. You're looking for a reactionary bite. And so you're going to go through colors. So when you go from white to black, well, black's going to be a little bit more in that neutral, that subdued color, natural. And that'll tell you something too. So because every time you go through your rotations, if it's a bright day and a bright reaction, almost always reactionary bites are brighter flies. Not always, definitely not always. But you can start putting the puzzle together even faster if you go through and you say, well, they're slashing it white or chartreuse or whatever it is. Might be a day where you say, well, less emphasis on the neutral tones. if you see a fish, and I missed that earlier, if you see a fish's mouth open and closed, it will tell you, it means that you had a committed fish and you blew it. And it's usually going to be the speed of your retrieve that was usually what it means is you saw it and you paused your fly and killed the fly in front of the fish. They know things don't die in front of them and they just shut up. But their mouth will open. It'll tell you that was an actual feed. And it will, if you're paying attention, you should always watch your fly. That's the most important thing that streamer anglers should do, is they should learn to move their fly and they watch their fly. And that will teach you a ton about what's going on around you in your environment. But if you see a mouth open, it means it was a not necessarily you don't see a reactionary bite. That fish could be coming at you at 30 miles an hour in a distance of 4 feet. You're not going to see everything. But if you see mouths, you know it's open. That generally tells you you're into a food bite. So that would be more like on the dry fly thing when we're going through a selective feed, right? Mm-hmm. And so you get the reactionary bites. Then, like I said, if they come up and swirl at it, I change my retrieve. So with a dry fly, you are always on a dead, not always, but you're fishing to a fly that's not running across the surface generally. And so it's not, and so it's more, it is the color might become an important thing. With this one, you got to identify if they're reactionary bites first or if they're food bites. And you fished with me, you'll see all of a sudden things change. And all of a sudden, I love to start super fast, but I only give it so long. And I probably jig slow more than, I was just down in Chile and I was fishing down there and was kind of trying to find flies they wouldn't eat. And I went through burning and burning and burning. I thought, I want to see something. I throw on an Nancy P, and I had a dozen fish eat in 2 casts, right? I went from burning, and I wasn't turning much. I put on a Nancy, and I jig, and I'm pulling it away from fish. They're here they come, right? I see them, and instantly, I went to a different color, which is a neutral tone, because I wondered if they would come on a food bite. And I started jigging, and literally I just kept pulling it away from them. Most of them are, piss ants, 14, 18-inch fish. And so I was pulling it away from them, and then I'd wait, and then here come another one, or maybe the same one come from some other direction, I don't know. But literally 2 minutes before that, I'm burning flies and running, and I'm not getting eats, right? Mm-hmm. And so you got to identify which one it is. So that it's somewhat like the dry, where you're going through, and it's a selective feed. You decide if it's a slow eat, it'll be more selective. Mm-hmm. If it's a chartreuse, bright chartreuse, white, yellow, and you're getting those smashing hits, you're on a reactionary thing, and you can start cutting the equation down when you know it's a bright reactionary day, and you're not. But then the same thing, if they're not eating it, you might go to a different retrieve and a more earth tone fly. So it does cut it down a little bit, but never hold the fly longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I think the moral of that story, coming from 2 men that probably sell
flies.
$5 million with flies between us a year, you should buy lots of flies.
Yeah. And people ask me all the time with the same thing, the same question.
Yeah.
I said, well, if you could only have one, I says I'd have a dungeon in 6 colors.
Right.
I said, but I would never drive with one fly. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It just you don't have one dry fly either.
No, if you got a streamer box full of olive flies, you're only going to be successful 1 day a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, friends. Sorry to be so long and winded there, but I think a lot of good information there. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks as always for being here. Appreciate Kelly being here in Columbus, Ohio. I'm getting tired of flying out to Montana all the time to see him, so it was good to have him here. And as always, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free, and it really helps us out. You won't miss an episode. And hit that like button. Just makes us feel good. And stay tuned. We've got a lot more coming at you.